bit off piste here, but there may be one or two questions that are springing up for people now, and I'd be happy that we deal with them now, since you're both, primed, and it's still in our heads because it is quite complex. Somebody does have a question. We'll keep this tight. There's 2 questions at least. Thank you.
I'm just not quite sure about I suppose I just come from a community that initially missed out on the health communities because the deprivation index and the deprivation index was influenced by the fact that there's increased gentrification in the area, and I think that might be quite common. And I was just wondering about, has there much thought gone into that, because there's small pockets of extreme deprivation within areas that are being gentrified, and how does the Pobal or the Parliament, whoever makes these decisions, look at that balance? They're making decisions obviously on that. The Trust has.
Sure. No, look, I'm happy to take that question. Certainly one of the things that we will be looking at this time, and we've already... so is this on? No. Now, is that better? Yes. Yeah. Great. We have already asked, so the author, Jonathan Prashkus, will be putting together the index. One of the questions that we're asking him, he's going to be undertaking an analysis, will be to look at the degree of variance within small areas. It's always been the case that, even within small areas, the small area is 150 households, it's quite small, generally will be a street. The OSI tried to draw the boundaries quite cleverly so that within a small area, you're more likely to share socioeconomic characteristics with those you face on your street rather than the house behind you. So that kind of stuff feeds into it. But there'll always be a degree of even within small areas, some quite affluent and some disadvantaged or deprived. I suppose there's been queries such as, has change in the housing policy, things like HAP, are they affecting that? So one of the things that we've asked the author to do in terms of the next iteration of the index is to consider, and we'll be putting together a report, is to consider the degree of variance and variation within small areas of affluence and disadvantage, and is that growing, and if there's more variance, I think that tells us in terms of how you should and shouldn't use the index. If it's not the case, well then we'll know that too. But no, it's definitely a question that we're aware of need to be answered from a data perspective.
Was another question?
So slightly aligned to that, how much does affluence mask private treatment that wouldn't be reflected in this, do you think?
Well, I would, as I say, only publicly funded services are required to report to us, but actually almost all the residential services do report to us. Because often, the beds are funded by both HSE or private, and they don't distinguish. But what we don't have is private counsellors, or they're not required to report to us. So yes, there is something that we need to consider. But we do get, almost all the residential data, and that's one thing, and something we're constantly working about how to improve our coverage to make sure that it is as accurate as possible.
If I could have one alignment, maybe it's not so much the affluence disadvantage, maybe more urban rural, but just to consider when looking at the data as well, is because it's treatment data, if there's no local treatment options available to you, then prevalence will not be seen in treatment data.
Thank you. Is there... Yeah, John. Thank you.
Just a quick, John Bennett, coordinator with English Campers Roots Task Force. Just to compliment you guys on this, it'll be a fantastic resource in terms of trying to, I suppose, look at who our projects are working with, where they're from, and because there's also an issue around, sort of picking up with what the senator was just saying there a few minutes ago, is that where there isn't services, people are coming into disadvantaged areas. And I'm not saying that's an issue or a problem. It's great people are coming forward for help on that. But it'll be interesting in terms of just trying to sort of analyse what is actually going on and having hard data around that. But the other thing, I just to ask a question is around the Public Maps facility has been a massive resource to everyone involved in working at a local community level, and it sort of really has I suppose made the CSO stats, so much stuff like that, so accessible to so many people and on the ground. And it's helped in terms of even being able to have a conversation of equality with people who are service users or people who are professionals, because it's actually quite accessible, you know, and quite understandable. And the visual service side of it is also very, very important. But I just wonder, is there any plans to try and integrate this data into that sort of facility, given its accessibility? You know what I mean? It's sort of like a go-to for everybody now working on the ground, you know, in terms of trying to get hard data. And I just wonder, is there some way like you trying to integrate the two things together, you know, because it would be a massive, marvellous resource if possible. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I agree. You know, I think there's a lot of value in the data that's been presented there. I suspect there could be a lot of value gleaned from that data from the people in this room in terms of task force decisions. So look, I mean, obviously there would be things that would need to be ironed out from a technical perspective point of view. Obviously, there's, you know, small areas can have very, very low numbers. You know, you wouldn't want to be publicly releasing where the small area has maybe 1 or 2 health treatments, that kind of thing. But you know, all that can be sorted.
You've got already.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.